Hey guys, welcome back to Legacy and Lattes. I am Portia Wood, your favorite generational wealth planning attorney.
And I am Charlene Berry. Welcome back, everyone. We are so excited to have our podcast today. Last week, we had some really in depth talk about maternal health and even mental health, and we want to kind of continue that conversation today. We do have a special guest that will be joining us. But Portia, how was your week? How's what's going on? How are you feeling?
My week has been crazy, actually, since the last time we talked. We had a death in the family, which was very unexpected. Kind of came out of nowhere, and we've been sort of dealing and grappling with what that means, particularly for the young children in our lives, right? The 6-year-olds who are trying to navigate that kind of loss. So it's been an emotionally heavy week
Mm,
in our household.
yep.
A lot of sadness, a lot of grief, and just trying to work through all of those things. But at the end of the day, the thing that I always hold on to is like what my grandfather used to say. People ask you, how are you? And he's like, I'm above ground. It's a great day to try again, right? Like whatever I need to do, I can still do it because I'm above ground. So I just kind of hold on to that, and so I'm great. Best day ever.
Every
How are you?
every day is the best.
Every day, every
It's
day.
so interesting
Hey.
because I feel like this last week I don't know if Mercury's in retrograde. I don't know what is going on, but it has been right what you're saying, one of those weeks, right? Like some energy is off and maybe it's my energy, the world's energy, which it feels really heavy. And I've talked to a lot of my friends, a lot of my peers that are also feeling heavy. And I wonder if, and we
Mhm.
always talk about we're going through this transition period in life that we're becoming more focused and aware. And you talked about, your 6-year-old dealing with grief as a 6-year-old and how we are
Yeah.
feeling our emotions. And it's really on theme of what we're gonna get to talk to about today with our guest speaker. But I myself, I know I'm ready for this week. It's we're recording this on a Friday. I'm ready for this week to be
We're
over.
recording it on a Friday when the episode has just launched. So for those of you who have not checked out last week's episode, definitely go over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and check out the latest episode of Legacies and Lattes, because it's going to lead you right into this episode of
Yep.
Legacies and Lattes.
Yep. So I
So
am
one of the things. Oh, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
I
Yeah,
was like,
I'm
I
just
was like,
talking.
I was finished. I was just gonna say, I am so ready for this week to be over. I am
Yeah.
wanting a renew, a refresh, a reset, and I think that's
Mhm.
something that maybe as young professionals, and we've talked about that being boss women, sometimes it's okay to like, this week was a lot. Let's
Mhm.
reset, renew, relax. I'm really ready for this upcoming
Absolutely.
weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers to the weekend, right? I've got my coffee here, right? Cheers to the weekend. One of the things that I am was so impactful last week was really just talking about all the stories,
Mhm.
right? It was refreshing to share my birth story. I didn't realize how much I had been sort of harboring that resentment of that experience. And there was still a bit of anger, like 6 years later there's still anger with the medical professionals there, and their sort of miscarriage or mishandling of my birth, or my birth experience, and how like I still feel robbed. And it was interesting because I don't ever really tell that story except for on here. Like, I don't think I'd told it in
Mhm.
6 years, and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, "Wow, yeah, just telling it brought up so much emotion for me that I didn't realize that I was still holding on to." So I had to, like, schedule an appointment with my therapist, and I was like, "We're gonna have to unpack this because why is this still impacting me?" But it also was a great awakening for me to say, "Hey, we probably should keep having this conversation." Because we got a lot of comments from women, from all over the country who had a similar sort of feeling around their birth story. Whether it be that they felt mishandled, whether that they felt unheard, whether they had difficulty in the postpartum stage afterwards, really connecting with their kids. And it seemed like we hit a nerve, right? We hit a nerve in the community where women finally were getting this moment of, yeah, that's me. It wasn't just me. I wasn't alone in that. Some other people had that same experience. And people were really grateful also for the resources. So shout out to, March of Dimes, who's doing some really great work on maternal health in our country. So just shout back out to them. And several other organizations that we will send you out some resources, like we said on the podcast before. But I'm really excited to bring in a mental health professional
Mhm.
to come and talk with us. Because while we can talk our shit, right? We can talk our shit all day long about our own experiences. It's so important for us to bring someone who's actually trained to have these conversations with us. So I don't know. So that's what we're doing today, you guys. We're gonna bring her back in. So we're gonna go to break real quick. We're gonna come back and we're gonna bring in and introduce Dr. Marissa Long, who is going to talk with us about mental health. Be right back.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. After our quick break, we do want to jump right back in. We have a special guest with us today. We have Dr. Marissa Long. She is the owner and director of ARC Counseling and Wellness here in California. She is a licensed clinical health psychologist specializing in reproductive mental health, chronic illness, and grief. Welcome with us today, Dr.
Wow.
Marissa Long.
Thank you for being
Thank you. Thank
here.
you. Good to be here. Glad to hop in.
Yes.
Man, can you just those credentials? Reproductive mental health, chronic illness, and grief. If that ain't a word, right? Because that is exactly what we are talking about here,
Mhm.
here and
Yeah,
have
it's
been
all together,
talking
right?
about. What'd you say?
It's all together,
It's all
right? They
together.
all lead
It's
into
all
Hand
each
in
other.
together.
hand.
Hmm.
Yep.
But Dr. Lung, we were hearing from women, and maybe you hear this in your practice too. So much grief around the birth process, right?
Yes.
And I felt really personally, right? I felt really bad about grieving because I had a healthy baby.
Oh.
So it's like I
Hmm.
have this
Hmm.
healthy baby. How dare I be so angry about the birth process because
Hmm.
my baby is healthy and some people don't have healthy babies. And so like I should
Right.
count my blessings. But then we started
Mm.
talking about it on the session last week and I realized no, I'm angry about my birth
Yeah.
experience. And
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to get another one. And so, do you see that a lot in your practice?
All the time.
Mm.
And if you think about it, like so many other things, especially in American culture, American society, we're kind of told that we should feel and think a particular way. And so when something happens that is off of the track that we've, thought that we were going to follow, we still think that we should feel and think this other way. But the ways that you feel when something goes way off plan, when someone is harmed, when a process is taken from you or put upon you, it makes perfect sense to feel differently. It makes perfect sense to grieve, to be angry, to be sad, to be confused, to be traumatized.
Mhm.
Yeah. Traumatized. That's an interesting word. I never thought about it as being traumatized.
Yeah.
But when as soon as you said that, it's like it sent chills up my spine. I was like,
Mm.
"Huh, is that
Yeah.
what I have been feeling? Was
Mm.
traumatized by this experience?" Because one of the things that came up, and I know you weren't on with us last week, but I had this whole birth plan. I spent 3 days being induced in a hospital, very specific, without medication, right? Very much wanted to do this naturally. They do the pitocin because you're in a hospital setting. That's part of the requirements. But um, you know, my doctor finally convinced me. They said, "You're not progressing. You're not progressing
Mm.
fast enough. So we need to up the pitocin. And so let's give you some medication. Let's let you rest so that in the morning you can push, right?"
Mm-hmm.
So I finally concede and I say, "Fine." I knew as soon as they put it in though, I knew I was like, I've set myself up for a C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of the night, the nurse came in, noticed that my son's heart rate had dipped, didn't call my doctor, didn't wake us up, turned the pitocin off entirely. So by the time I woke up in the morning, I was no longer in active labor. My water
Wow.
had been broken for too long, the risk of infection too high, and I was wheeled into an emergency surgery about 30 minutes later.
Wow.
And so when I think back to that experience, I'm angry. I'm angry about
Yeah.
and then I'm
Mhm.
conflicted because I have a healthy baby. How dare I
Mhm.
be angry, you know?
Oof.
Ooh,
Yeah.
ooh.
Yeah.
Shar,
It's
you were
so
talking.
disrespectful even, it's
Yeah.
just if you think about it, it's disrespectful of the validity of the feelings that you had related to that experience that you can't be angry or sad about
Mhm.
it, right? But that's the level of disrespect I think we're taught societally to have when our feelings don't necessarily align with the way that society thinks they should be.
Mm,
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 But
mm,
that makes so much sense that you would feel that. And yeah, I mean, when birth becomes a medical emergency,
mhm.
because birth is not a medical emergency.
Right,
Birth didn't even used to be medical, right?
right.
When it becomes a medical emergency, it can absolutely be traumatic. And
Mm,
unfortunately, because we don't have these conversations in society, we don't even think about that impact. And like you said, years later, we often realize, right?
mhm.
And for many people, they just keep doing it again and again and again. And it just kind of adds. And they don't realize until maybe the third kid sometimes that, wow, this is a
Mm.
big deal. I'm impacted by this.
I'm impacted, yeah. You know, Shar, you were
Mhm.
talking about your best friend who just had a baby who also ended up having an emergency C-section, right?
mhm.
That was that experience, yeah.
Mm.
So I haven't got the chance to actually go and see her and talk to her about that experience. I'm not a
Oh,
mother, so
wow.
I also do can't just listening and hearing these conversations and I can't even fathom. I can't even imagine. I know she's kind of one that rolls with the punches. But like you're saying, it's a traumatic experience. I know myself, it's about control at the end of the day. I am
Mm,
very type A personality. I'm very these when you're putting plans into place and something goes off kilter, like we have to accept all of the feelings and emotions that come after it, right? And I think that
yeah,
in any situation, you know, birthing, especially, I can't imagine the day where I become a mother and I lose my mind if it doesn't go the way that I think and plan and having these conversations and stating to each other like what Dr. Marissa was saying, like it is okay to be upset. It is okay to be angry when you're planning something that who knows what could happen, right? Like you're giving
yeah,
birth, you're bringing beautiful life into this world, but what about you? Like who takes care of your emotions and your
mm.
mental at
Mhm.
the end of the day, right? But yeah, I have to do better and check in with her. Life gets so busy sometimes, and I know Portia, you mentioned in our last podcast, just asking like, how can I help? You know, after the fact,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You've brought this beautiful baby home, but who's checking in on the mom? Who's checking in
yeah,
Mm.
on them to say if
Mhm.
they're okay, right?
yeah.
Right.
Dr.
Yeah.
Long, when you're dealing with your patients, and obviously not asking you about your specific patients, but when we're looking at reproductive mental health, what are some of the things that you're seeing? What are some of the challenges that women are facing? And what are some of the advice that you might have for our listeners who may be going through some of the same things?
Yeah. Good question. A lot. So I'm gonna try not to overtake things here, but
No, please, that's
I
why
think
you're here. We want to hear from you.
okay. I think one of the first things to kind of hold awareness of, and that we should all be talking about a bit more, is that our mental health journey during our reproductive time doesn't start at birth or after birth, right? It starts
Mm,
before.
mhm.
And whatever is happening before, right, either while we are pregnant or even years prior, impacts all the way down the road until after we've given birth. And so I have a lot of clients who I see, you know, in the early 20s or whatnot, who are nowhere near thinking about having a family yet in that way and having children. And I say, hey, when you get there, see a therapist. Like, come back to me, see somebody,
Yep.
just even if it's every month, so that you can stay on top of what
Mm,
may come for you.
mm.
Mm.
You know, that's really important. It starts
I
before,
relate to that
and we
hard.
just we don't do that.
That is, I
That's
hear
Good,
you,
so
and
good.
I'm like,
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Why don't
I
they
think the
tell
other
us this
thing,
stuff?
because
I mean, they
yeah. Well,
don't
who's
tell
the
us this
they?
stuff. I mean, society, our doctors, our
Right.
community,
Mhm.
they make this idea of like the baby blues. It's all sort of just like swept under the rug of like women.
Yes.
Society says get it together. If you can't handle it, you're weak. You should be able to just do all these things, push out a baby, clean the house, welcome guests, make sure you're doing food so that they can come and hold your baby while you do laundry. It's like
Mm.
Right.
that's what society's
Exactly.
expectation is, and nobody says, "Hey, check out your mental health."
Right, right. Which is it's crazy.
Yeah.
Our mental health, depression, anxiety, PTSD, any of these things that we can have, which are called postpartum or perinatal mood and anxiety disorders,
Mm.
they are one of the highest complications of
Mm.
birth.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So, and so we are all susceptible to them. If we have any pre-existing conditions, we are of course more susceptible to them. So it
Right.
absolutely needs to be a part of the conversation. But because we know that society is not yet in a place where they're going to do that, where they're going to have these open conversations, we
Mhm.
really need to lean into that from a family
Mm.
perspective. We need to talk
Mm.
to our parents, to our siblings who've already had kids, and see what their experiences were. And we need to talk about that openly. We need to talk about that friend to friend,
Exactly.
Honestly.
right?
Yeah.
We need to talk about it
Mhm.
honestly.
Honestly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and in detail,
Yeah.
Mhm.
in detail. Because all that we see from society and from media is this like happy
Mm.
picture,
Mhm.
everything's lovely,
Mhm.
maybe you cried a little bit, and then you just moved on and had this wonderful baby and everything was great.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, even if mental health isn't a significant factor or mental illness isn't a significant factor for someone when they've had a baby, it is not all rainbows and unicorns,
Right.
right? You haven't
Really not?
slept, you have a whole different relationship with your partner all of a sudden. You have a different
Mhm.
relationship with yourself and your body all of a sudden. It is
Mm-hmm.
wild.
And that doesn't
It's
go
wild.
away, and that doesn't go away for a really long time.
It
I'm
changes, but it doesn't go away. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Hmm.
6 and a half years in, and I'm still walking around, and I can't blame it all on baby weight as much as I still try, right? I blame my darling boy, but, there's also the stress of COVID and these last several years and parenthood and solo
Yes.
parenthood during all of these times and business ownership and all of these things
Mm.
have compounded into this stress changed,
Yeah.
sort of body situation that is all tied together, and
Hmm.
it's just never ending. And Shar, I know we were talking offline a little bit that you were feeling
Oh
this
my
stress and this
God.
anxiety all week long, and it's like,
Yep.
is it our expectation of women
Mm.
that's causing this
Hmm.
stress and anxiety?
Yep. I
Marissa's talked
well,
along,
that's
like, I don't
Dr.
know, yeah.
Dr. Marissa. This is how we brought you in today,
It's expectation, but it's also that our society isn't set up to take care of
right?
women.
Mm,
We are here to produce and
Yep.
reproduce and
mhm,
take care of other people, but who takes care of us, right? So when you were talking earlier about, why don't we know this? It's because everything with female health and mental health is often really subdued. We are not researched. We are
mm-mm,
not supported at the same level as our male
Mm.
counterparts. So how would we know these things? Why
right,
wouldn't we just be back at work within 6 to 8 weeks?
yeah,
And in all honesty, a lot of other countries and cultures do not operate this way,
Mm.
right, right,
right? Then if you add in, aspects of diversity and minority status, it's a whole other level, right? Especially in the United States, and it's not getting better,
yeah.
unfortunately.
That-
I mean, it's
You know.
terrifying to even think about giving birth.
Mm.
Sorry.
Mhm.
No, Shar, you
Mhm.
were going and we both popped in. We're like, "Dr. Marissa, tell
We're
us
like,
more."
yes. Yes, 1000. And I relate to the fact of being a young, professional, like boss women that were running businesses, were, dealing with motherhood, dealing with friendships. And I know in one of our first podcast episodes, Portia, we talked about Chandra Rhimes, where she said, you can't have all three, right? Like somewhere
Yeah.
something is
Mm.
failing, our mental health is failing. Um,
No,
and
100%.
Mm.
and that's sometimes okay to say. And I know I have a very supportive partner where we have those conversations where, they say now, even in relationships, oh, you need to be 50-50. Where no, sometimes it's 80-20 or 20-80, but to have a support
Mhm.
system that understands and respects that, your friends that are going through maybe different things that you, that also, hey, I can't show up today like I normally can because I'm going through things, and being honest
Mm-hmm.
with that. And I know this past week, I know I reached out, Portia and I talk offline about things, and I've had to say that this week. You know, I'm going to be a bridesmaid in a wedding at the end of this month. I have a big move coming up. I'm working, you know, full time and all of these things that I'm like, I can't show up 100% everywhere, you know, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But to be open and honest and transparent, because we live in a society that is so much, we're not fully honest. We're showing
Mm.
the sides of social media where everything's fine, glitz and glamour, and this,
Mm-hmm.
that, and the other. It's like, that's not what's really going on, girlfriend. Like, let's see,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's great to have these conversations. It's great to have, you know, people that might not be struggling in the same ways that I am, but also have, you know, their own table of struggles, right? Um,
What do you say to those women? Dr. Long, what do you say to the Charlenes, to the Me's, to the women who are out here who are experiencing and
Yeah.
feeling this stress and anxiety? Because it is this expectation, it feels like, of you need to maintain a house, you need to maintain a career. Your only value comes in if somebody has if a man has chosen you into partnership. You need to
Mm-hmm.
produce children. We're going to start creating laws all around the country that are going to dictate your body and make sure that you are forced to then have children, and then you have to read these stories of women who are being forced to essentially be walking coffins, like all of these things that just constantly messaging you to say that you aren't valued, but you need to
Mm.
show up and be valuable to other people, but
Yeah.
we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
value you. And like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
say to that? Because the society doesn't change, like that
mm,
baseline reality doesn't change even if we
Right.
shift our mindset. So how do we navigate that?
Mm.
Or how do you help
Yeah.
your clients navigate that?
Right. Obviously, of course, it's on a very individual basis, but
Sure.
I think one of the things that I have to personally do in that work is to make sure that I am not infusing my own
mm,
values into
Mm, mhm. Yeah,
into the session, because my values don't matter when it comes to the person that's in
right.
front of me.
yeah.
But in all honesty, oftentimes the clients have similar values in many ways. And
Mhm,
so, one of the things that I've really done a lot more with my clients in the last several years is lean into challenging, helping folks challenge how they are holding patriarchal ideas and values
mm,
and holding distress about those things, and then disconnecting from those previously held values that don't actually align with them. They don't align with their health, their
Mm,
safety, their mind.
mm,
That is a interesting, and I think when I went to school, I didn't have any expectation of that being as interwoven into the work as it has been. It's been a really interesting observation I've had of folks, and just seeing the light bulb pop
right.
up. And so sometimes I'll say, where did you get that ideal? And they'll be like, I don't know, I guess it's society. And I said, I'll say something like, society that has your best interest in mind, and society that is set up to protect and take care of women, something like that. And then there it's like, oh my gosh, I've been holding and thinking about this
mm,
thing
Mm,
forever, holding expectations of myself this way, but I actually think it's bullshit.
mm,
yeah,
And so
yeah,
when that light bulb goes off, we can now transition to what you actually value and hold and believe and is true for you and supports your wellness and your health and your mental health. And it's really powerful. And that does absolutely play into when birthing people are having their babies and getting
mm-hmm,
pregnant, and they've been holding all of this stuff and realizing that's not even real.
right,
That's
yeah,
been assigned to me, and I can negate that. I can leave that
right.
behind.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's powerful work
yeah.
for those who are ready.
You
Yeah,
are doing transformational work. Um,
I
it's
hope so.
incredible. Even just in that moment, that one little thing that you just said, which is not little at all, but disassociating from the ideas of the patriarchal society that do not align with us,
Mm-hmm,
that
Hmm.
we didn't give to ourselves, that were put upon us
Right.
by a society that doesn't protect us, and
Hmm.
reframing our own thinking. I mean, it's powerful.
It is.
So I hope all
Yeah.
of you guys listening heard that, because what
Yeah.
we saw in so many of the comments after our last podcast was that so many of you were feeling this angst, this anxiety, this stress around your birth experiences, around just being boss women in general in society, and trying to navigate the burnout that's sort of collectively was being expressed across sort of the comments that we saw, and understanding really that's not yours to own.
Mm.
Mm,
Is that what
mm.
you're saying, that it's not ours to own?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to stay aligned with that when it doesn't actually align with us. But something that you were just saying in there kind of highlighted for me another piece of this,
Hmm.
which is that a lot of those thoughts and those expectations that we hold of ourselves also come from our parents
Mm. Yeah.
and how we were raised with them. And of course, theirs comes from that even deeper level of patriarchy that we are like slowly and gently working our way out of with every
Mhm.
generation. But that's another really difficult part of it, because if my parents taught me this, if I saw them do it this way, then it's even more kind of
Right.
intrinsic to us, and we can remove it.
Generational
Yeah.
trauma.
Generational trauma.
Generational.
It doesn't just
Yeah.
relate to money and to
Mm.
physical trauma, but mental trauma. And it's the head trash
Yeah.
we learn,
Yep.
right? It's the head
Mm,
trash that sort of comes in. I talk a lot about this in my financial literacy courses. Shar knows, we talk about the head trash, the things that you've accepted about your beliefs
yeah.
about money and your money story that don't serve you.
Mm,
Mm.
And it's
hmm.
interesting that I can have those conversations with my clients as it relates to their financial wellness. But it was just like light bulb moment when you said it for me about
Mm,
the mental and emotional,
Yep.
because I do harbor
right.
so much of that. And some of it is my
Hmm.
parental expectations. I mean, I tell my mom all the time, listen, something's got to give, right? She'll be like, why
Mm,
are there dishes in the sink? Or like, why is there laundry on the couch? Everybody's got that one chair. And I'm like, because I
yeah.
can't do it all.
Mm.
I can't. I
Yes.
can't do it all. And you know what? And today I can't afford to have a housekeeper in my house every single day.
Mm.
So the laundry will sit there until I get to it. And
Right.
then, I had to learn, and I told Shar in a previous episode, I had to learn to be okay with outsourcing,
Mm.
looking at my
Yeah.
budget and
Yeah.
outsourcing the things that were not, that I was told were my roles as a woman, right?
Mhm,
Doing the laundry, these
mhm.
things, outsourcing that, and not feeling less than by doing it, not feeling like
Yeah, good.
I am less of a woman or less in my goddess because I took my
Mhm.
laundry to be folded by someone else. Right? And
Right, yeah,
accepting that. And I didn't
yes,
even realize that
absolutely.
that's what it was, but it's everything you just said.
Hmm.
Over our.
And, Shar, you had said something about your friend, and you want to work on reaching out to her and seeing what she needs, and asking her, that. And I think that that's a really powerful thing that we all need, is we need friends who check in on us
Yeah.
and ask us what we need. But the thing is, we as women in particular, I think as women of color, it's even a higher level of this, we don't do a good job of accepting help
Mm.
or of
Mhm.
even knowing what we need help with. So
Oh my
one of the things I
goodness.
recommend people to do is to, and I recommend anybody listening to really think about this, find 3 to 5 things that you can write down,
Yeah.
that you can say at any moment, no matter what happens, if my house burns down, if I lose my job, if my partner and I break up, if whatever, no matter what, I can receive one of these 3 to 5 things from anybody that asks me. I can copy and paste it into a text message when they say, what can I do?
Oh.
I can send it to
Mm.
my close friends in advance and say, hey, if I ever need something, you can always do any one of these things without asking me. And that is huge, without asking me, because then if someone's in distress and you're like, hey, what can I do? What can I do? I don't know. I'm in distress.
Wow.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
you give that to people that really know and love you in advance, then they can just do it. You just send me a meal, and you didn't ask me. It's just at my door, and I'm going to eat it at some
I
point,
love
right?
Wow.
that.
Or
I
you can
love
bring me a
that.
coffee, whatever
1000%.
those things.
That is.
Yeah, super.
That is,
It's
we
so
need to
good.
write that down somewhere. That is a
Do
huge,
it.
huge, huge. I've never even thought to do something like that, because
No, not at
when you
all.
are in distress, or, and not even recognizing that you're within distress, she's one of my best friends. And you reach out and you say, how can I help? And sometimes you're right. Like, we as women, we're like, I got it. I'll figure it out on my own. And if we can have that plan in place, or we know, like, I know she likes X amount of chocolates or this, that, and the other, and this will make them feel good. Like
Yeah.
putting a smile on her face, bringing that. My
Mm-hmm.
partner and I know when we kind of have our conversations when I'm in distress, he's like, okay, do you want solutions or do you want comfort? Right? Like, how can I? And that's something that, these resources that
Yeah.
you're saying, like, I've never thought to do that, to say to him, these are the three things that could help me right now in this moment that would help me to feel better. So, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And him having access to that list in advance so he doesn't even have to ask
Right.
you, that's really where it's at. That's really
Trying to think of what those 3 things would be. Like, I
Right.
literally
Like,
just
what
had
are
this
your
conversation with someone the other day where I was like, "I'm overwhelmed. I'm really sick of feeling like I have to be strong for everybody, like, somebody just needs to be strong for me."
Yep.
And I'm like
yes.
and he was like, "Well, like, you don't let people help you. So, like, what do you want help with?" And I was like,
Yes.
"I don't know. I'm just overwhelmed."
Yeah.
I was like, "I don't know.
Yeah.
You figure it out. Like, you figure out how to be helpful. I don't know. I'm overwhelmed." So that's so interesting because even
Yeah.
as I sit here, I'm like, "What would it be? What would
Hmm.
it be that I
Well,
would accept?"
one of those safest things is just food.
Mm.
Mhm.
We all have to eat. And I don't know who doesn't get some decision fatigue at some
Yep.
point. And
Right.
when you're having to figure out what I need to eat for dinner,
Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes you'd be like, well, I'm gonna have some cheese and some wine because I can't figure out even what's in my fridge as I stare at it,
Right.
right? It's gonna be charcuterie
Are you
Lunchable
just reading my
situation.
whole life? She's just reading my whole life, Shar. I knew that this was gonna be. How did you know that I had brie and
Right,
prosciutto and a glass of wine for for dinner the other night? That was like the
right.
whole thing. I was like, my son got this whole course meal because you got to have vegetables and fruit and the whole thing. He got all this stuff, and I was like, I don't want to eat this. Like, I can't even eat this. I don't know what I want. I'm just gonna
Right,
eat this cheese.
right. That,
Oh,
yeah.
Mm.
y'all.
Hmm.
You guys, I gotta say, this has been such an incredible conversation, and I know we still have a little bit of time to go, but I do want to shift gears a little bit, if we could, throwing everybody off a little bit. Um, we're sticking with the anxiety topic. I want to add in. I feel like over the last week, and I don't know if you've been feeling this too, Shar, but with the news and everything that's going on, the usual tools that I have used to like calm myself down aren't working
Mm.
because the anxiety about the what ifs, um, because I always am like, well, the what if this happens? What if that happens? Seem to be coming true,
Right.
right? We're
Hmm.
currently in the news, at least, it's being shown what looks like something that could kick off to a civil war, and we are seeing very clearly with actual armed forces on either side, federal and state powers actually in conflict. Like
Hmm.
not, not in negotiation rooms, but like actual armed forces in a standoff. And that gives me so much anxiety that it's like I have to constantly force myself back to the present task.
Mm.
And I don't know if you're feeling that, Shar, because I know that you come from a military family and you come from a
Mm-hmm.
military background, and so it just feels so overwhelmingly stressful.
Yeah.
Like in a second, everything we've worked for, everything we know is going to completely change.
Yep.
How, are you starting to see that anxiety come into your practice? And if so, what advice do you have for us? Tell us all the things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've been seeing that in droves since a very specific election several years ago, and
Mm,
then at many waves of time across the pandemic and social unrest and all of these things. So absolutely.
yeah.
You said something so interesting there that I don't think people realize, and I love that you did, which is that sometimes the things that used to work for me
Mhm.
are either not
Mm-hmm.
available
Mhm.
or just aren't working anymore.
Right.
This is why therapy, right? Because we often need support at figuring out what is that new thing in an adaptive way, not a
Mm.
maladaptive way
Mm-hmm.
where we're further harming ourselves or further adding to our stress. So yeah, I mean, there's tons of things that we can do. I can give some examples of things, but because we're individuals, we
Yeah,
have different situations, we have different
sure,
backgrounds. Any one thing that someone else is going to benefit from isn't necessarily going to benefit us.
sure.
But I think across the board for most people, some relaxation techniques such as like deep breathing,
Mm.
meditation are just wildly helpful. Finding some way to kind of turn off or turn down, what's happening in our mind using those techniques is just really, really
Yep.
great. There's all sorts of different relaxation techniques. There's all sorts of different mindfulness techniques. But those are typically, good just in general for our bodies. So good for most people. But on an individual basis, beyond that, I think it's good to recognize that I might not be able to shop for 2 hours and feel good anymore. I may not be able to, journal and have that impact anymore. We might move from journaling to voice
Yep.
journaling, because the journaling writing down doesn't let me express the intensity of my feelings as much as when I'm, speaking it into, a voice app or something.
Right.
So, it's change and we got to kind of stay up with it. But getting professional support and help with that is always a good idea when we can.
This has been
Oh my god.
amazing. I'm like, let me.
Sure, she just said something that, like, just blew my mind again, and I'm telling you that she's just reading my life. I hate journaling. I always buy journals because I want to journal because I realize that it should be therapeutic, but I hate journaling. And I'll start to write it
Yeah.
and it's like, this is not how I want to express myself. I have never
Mhm.
thought to just voice memo because I love to talk.
Yeah.
I love to talk about all kinds of stuff. And I've never thought about that as being a way to substitute for journaling.
Mm.
So instead I like
Yeah.
make TikTok videos and like random stuff, right? But it's like that could be a way to release some of
Yeah.
the stress and anxiety and to take it from your mind and to put it into some other format
Mm.
that you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to listen to ever again, right?
Mhm.
But just
Mhm.
a way to get it from your mind.
Mhm.
That is a word because people used to tell me all the
Okay.
time. My therapist gives me tasks to like write stuff down and like write down your feeling, and I'm like, I don't want to do it.
Eh,
Like, and I'm
Right.
so
Not gonna do it.
resistant, and I feel so bad because I'm like, I'm paying you, but I should do this, and then I'm like, I don't want to. But now
Yeah.
that whole other thought process of, oh, just voice it.
and it's and
Voice
it's
it.
so interesting because I even like the voicing or the journaling, I can't communicate my like I have come to realize that I'm needing to figure out how to communicate what I'm feeling. That's what I'm kind of going through
Mm,
right now, where I get frustrated trying to journal because I'm like, this isn't my voice isn't coming across as how I
yeah.
want it to
Mhm.
be. I'm not, and
Yeah.
sometimes maybe my voice sounds a little too angry or blunt, or but figuring out my communication
Mhm.
Mhm.
and trying to make my words and how I feel impactful. And it doesn't even have to be for anyone else, but within myself, it's like, why am I feeling this way? What is making me feel this way? And how can I understand myself of why I'm feeling that way?
Mm.
Because
Mhm.
I'm on
Mhm.
that Portia when you were like, it are the things and tools that you have used to use in the past no longer serving you right now. Because again, I'm
Yeah.
going through this transition period where I'm like, 2, 4, 3 years ago, I could go out with my girlfriends. I could have a night on the town. We talk, we
Mhm.
vent. We're like, but that's not me anymore. I tried that. I'm like,
Mhm.
that's not really what's serving my purpose, serving what I'm needing to fix. So
Mm.
so like I'm being fully transparent. Like I've now scheduled my first therapy session again next week. So I'm like,
Oh,
yeah, let me talk
yay!
because it's
That's
it's about
awesome.
going through those transition periods and figuring out what other resources. So having you on the call on this conversation today, Dr. Marissa, like amazing. Like you have
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head with exactly how we're feeling, the resources that we need, and it's times are changing, right? So,
Times are changing.
Yeah.
Times are changing, and,
Good.
Shar, you said something really important. It's like, again, I used to be able to be recharged by the people around me, the energy,
mm,
Mm.
right? Being in community, and our lives have changed so much in terms of whether or not that's even available, so some days I would take a spa day and be like, "I'm just gonna go work from the Korean spa," and be there, and even that now doesn't really serve what it is that I need because the anxiety and those things don't go away. It's just
Mm.
interesting. So what I realized and what I've started doing is just planning, right? I feel like I having a plan makes me feel more secure with everything that's going on.
mm,
And I
Mhm.
had to identify that some of my anxiety was from worrying about how the people that I love were going to be safe. So
Mm.
it wasn't even necessarily just about me, but like if this does really turn into a problem, how do I make sure that the people that I love are safe? right?
Yeah.
And there's little people and we're all in these different places and my parents are older. What are some things that I can do right now to make me feel safe? So I just like made a list and I was like, okay, communication. I need to make sure that if something happens, I'm able to communicate with my family.
Mm.
So I was like, we're all going to get this one long range walkie talkie and we're going to check in on channel 3 at 2:00 every day to just, if something happens, like that's the protocol. Right. And that was important for me. And I realized that helped to give me some peace and clarity. Um, but for me, because my sister said that it gave her more stress and anxiety.
Uh,
So she was like, I am actively trying not to pay attention to all the things that are happening in the world because it stresses me out. So this conversation is too much for me. So balancing those things between like what I needed and what she needed um, has been a unique challenge. But we do have a family brunch scheduled. Very excited about that. We put together a whole list, so I'm very excited about that. All the things. But as
mhm.
we come towards the end of our show, Dr. Long, what do you want to share with the audience? If you could just impart our listeners with anything that you wanted to share, right? We would be eternally grateful for your advice.
Okay. Yeah. I could be here all day for that, but
Girl, we will give you all
a
the
little
day for
snippet.
that.
Right. Just maybe to recap some of the key things that we talked about today. One is the way that you're feeling is valid, and discounting it isn't going to help anybody. And so doing an internal check of, is the way that I'm feeling, is the thing that I'm thinking about myself and how I'm feeling, is it aligned with like my reality and my truth and my wellness, or is it from something else or someone else that I don't necessarily align with? I think having that personal check-in is really good. I think, as you said, looking at our coping mechanisms and, determining if I need some new ones, finding a professional or support to help, identify that, being willing to move from, meditating in Om to meditating with extremely loud music and dancing on the floor, which is mine.
Love that.
Great. Just change things up a little bit. That's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And, I think this last bit that you both were kind of saying, if something in that has changed for you, which often for many of us has been moving from that community based, the pandemic kind of threw all of that out the window.
Yeah.
If that has changed, then really finding that new way to connect with yourself while still connecting with other people, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And I cannot express enough that I think everyone in general can benefit from having a, therapeutic support in their life.
1000%.
If you haven't done
Absolutely.
it, do it. If you've done it before, do it again.
Do it
Exactly.
again.
Yeah. Life is
And good therapists are hard to come by. So when people are looking for a therapist, sorry, Shar, but what are the things that our audience should be looking for in a good therapist? Is there, because there's lots
Oof.
of different types, right? So,
Yeah.
what kinds of questions should people be asking?
Let me write these
Good
down for
question.
my
Yes.
Like, let me get
You
this
know,
down.
what I like to correct when people say that a lot. They go, good therapists are hard to come by, because we're really not. It's just that because of the way our healthcare system is set up, we don't have the access that we need to therapists. And unfortunately, sometimes the therapists that are, going to be the best fit for us or that are like more skilled are not in our healthcare plans. And that is a bummer. But there are tons of phenomenal therapists out there. But I think one thing that we don't really have an awareness of, both when looking for a therapist or for a physician for that matter, is we are hiring these people to work for us for our health. So we can interview them.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, right? You can, and what that's called is a consultation. I don't know anybody who's ever set up a consultation for a physician unless you are paying out of pocket, right? But you absolutely can. You don't have to just go with the first physician that you've been handed, and you don't have to go with the first therapist that you've been handed. You can set up 10 to 15-minute consults with 5 of them and ask you questions, have your list, figure out what you want, see if the vibe is right.
Yeah.
Because even if someone is super, super skilled and talented at what they do, you just may not connect with them as a person, or they may trigger or activate things for you because they seem like your mom or like your dad or something, and that's not going to work for
And
you,
then
and
we
that's
fighting in
totally
the
fine.
session.
I sometimes can be good, but yeah, have your list of questions and do some consultations and interview them, because great ones are out there, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be the best fit for you.
I love that. I love that. You guys, thank you for tuning in to Legacies and Lattes. We are so, so grateful that Dr. Marissa Long could come on with us and share her expertise with not just us, but like all y'all, right? Because I I have been transformed. I'm about to voice journal for the first time today. I'm actually excited about trying to do that and see what I can get the heck out of my brain. So I actually have a spark of excitement around this. So thank you so much for
Thank
giving us your
you.
time, giving us your knowledge, for sharing with us and sharing with our
Absolutely.
audience, right? Because it's important to give ourselves permission. And I think in society we are taught we're not allowed to, right?
Mm.
And just to I don't know, everyone hates the term piggyback now. So now someone says veggie back. I don't know. It's like a whole thing. Anyway, just to join in what you said, right? Um we are okay with shedding the weight of other people's expectations that don't serve us.
Mm.
And we are allowed to do that. It's easier said than done, right? But we can. And I just thank you for reminding us that that's what it is. So, um, before we do our outro, Dr. Long, can you please tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you, how they can keep in touch with you, and if they want to hire you,
Mhm.
how they get in touch to hire you, and do they have to be in California to work with you? How does all that work?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the owner and director of ARC Counseling and Wellness in California. You do have to be in California to work with me or my team as a patient, but I do business consultations for other therapists, clinicians, and small businesses out there as well. And that can be all over the country or the world. Speaking engagements, of course. You can find us on Instagram at Dr. Marissa Long or at ARC Counseling and Wellness. And of course, you can call the office and go online to arccounselingandwellness.com if you want to book an appointment or a consultation to see if we're a good fit for you. And we work in a particular way that if you're not a good fit for us or we're not a good fit for you, we will help find you someone who is.
Oh,
Oh, I love that. I
thank
love that.
you. Thank you so much. It's
Having
been
me this
such
Yeah.
a needed discussion this week. I know for myself, I know we're going through some heavy times right now. We don't know if it's the end of the world with these aliens that are
Mm.
coming. We don't know if but these conversations need to be had. And I know for myself and my community and my close friends that I have, I know we don't do this enough. We're not honest and open enough. So thank you so much, Dr. Marissa Long, for coming on here today and giving us some tips
Yeah.
and resources that we can take away from today. I'm going to be writing my 3 needs down. I'm going to be posting them.
Make your
I'm going to
list.
be posting them on my Instagram, my Facebook. Like, if
Yeah,
you guys see
yeah.
my signs of distress, okay, this is what I need if I'm on there.
Good.
So thank
I
you
love
so
that.
much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, this has been another great candid conversation with Legacy and Lattes. I'm Portia Wood.
And I'm Charlene Berry.
And we were speaking with Dr. Marissa Long. She was talking to us about reproductive mental health, chronic illness, and grief, ways to deal with anxiety, where we as women, we can shed
Mm-hmm.
the weight of other people's expectations and ideas and really truly live in our authentic selves. She gave us some great resources and tips on how to be supported. I know if you guys are like me, it is very difficult to receive help or to even necessarily know what kind of help you need. So being able to write a list of 3 things that anybody can do at any time for you that can support you is really powerful. And to be able to send that with your community and let them say, hey, if you see me, like Shar said, you see me in distress, these are the things that you can do. You don't even have to ask. I mean, that's powerful. It's a way of owning ourselves, our mental health, of being able to be open to support. And so we're so grateful that she was able to join us in this conversation. And remember, guys, brew your legacy one cup at a time.
Until next
Cheers.
time.